Hello everyone, Bernina Jeff here. Today's is our monthly FTCU club, that is the Floriani Total Control software, and we're going to do some fun things today. And the theme of today is wine. One of my favorite things to do with my wife is go wine tasting in Central California. So we are going to make a placemat on FTCU, and you can make it as large as your largest hoop of your embroidery machine. I'm going to do this on a Solaris, so I can do this placemat 10.5 by 16 inches. And then we made matching napkins with a serger and a rolled edge. You need a piece of fabric about 14 by 14, and you roll edge all four sides. Put a little drip of fray check on the corner and trim it off, and you got matching napkins. So with that, let's go show you some fun things today. Here comes the computer. All right. So FTCU, this week or this month, we don't have any videos for you to watch. Everything is going to be right here on the screen. So the first thing we're going to do is actually make, if you can follow my cursor here, we're actually going to make this label shape. And I'm going to show you how to create the label shape and then save it in your custom shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and select every item here, select all, delete. Oh, I'm going to get rid of all that hard work. So now let's go on up to our shapes. Our shapes is this icon. And when you hover over it, it says custom shapes. It's green and it looks like a sort of a multi-circled green flower. So I'm going to left click on that to open up our shapes. And that's actually not where I'm going to go. So sorry. We're going to close that. We're going to create this with a rectangle and some circles. So we're going to open up our, it's a pencil, a blue ball, and a square. So we're going to click on that. And then we're going to left click on the rectangle, and the little rectangle is attached to my cursor. So I'm going to hold down my left cursor or mouse key and drag a box to a rectangular shaped box. Now we have to deselect that little rectangle attached to it. So you come over here to the top red arrow called your select arrow, and now you've deselected the shape. And now it's into a mode where we can edit that rectangle box we just made. I'm going to go ahead and make this rectangle as large as I want it for my placemat. These words are escaping me today. So I'm going to, with my properties box, I'm going to click on transform, and I'm going to make sure the maintain aspect ratio is unchecked. My width is going to be 15.8 inches, and the height is going to be 10.5 inches, because that'll fit inside the hoop of my Solaris. And then down here is apply. Uh-oh, what happened to the box? Well, the box is larger than my area, so one of your favorite tools to learn is double click on the magnifying glass. So double left click, and that will generate a screen the size of your project. So now if you look at it, we're a -8 there, and we're a +8, so that's basically 16 inches across. Now, I need to get a circle to cut out the corners here. That's really easy to do. We're going to go up to that same rectangle, but we're going to select the ellipse tool, and we're going to hold down my mouse, left mouse, and draw a circle. Just don't worry what size it is. The circle's there. We're going to transform the size here in a minute. I'm going to slide over and hit our select tool. Now that's selected. We're going to transform it to about 5 inches by 5 inches. 5.0 by 5.0, and apply. So there's my radius for these corners here. So now I'm going to grab the hold of that center and drop it onto a corner of my box. And don't get too OCD about this. Just get it as close to the corner as you can get. You can fuss for a half hour if you want to get really. So I've got my X right inside that corner. Now I'm going to use a tool that will trim this corner out, but the tool only works if you have 2 items selected. You can't have 3 items selected, you can't have 4, you can't have 1. You have to have 2 items selected. So 1 item is already selected. It's activated by that box. I am going to hold down the control key with my left hand, and then I'm going to put the cursor right on the line and click on it. So as you can see, it has selected the artwork of both the rectangle and the circle. Now, usually these green tools are up here on the second line way over to the right, but my screen wouldn't hold it. So I'm going to go to this tool that says it has 2 boxes with an intersection. So I'm going to drop it down. There's 4 options here: trim, weld, intersect, and exclude. The one we want to do is we want to trim out that corner. So I'm going to left click on trim, and look, voila, the corner is gone. So I'm going to deselect everything by clicking in the open workspace area. And now I'm going to grab hold of that circle and use it again. Whoops, I didn't grab the middle. So I'm going to select the circle, grab it in the middle. I'm going to use that same circle to cut out this corner. You're kind of getting the idea here, aren't you? So now I'm going to hold down the control key, hit that line, and I'm going to go up to trim, and there it is. Once you've selected the tool, it remembers what you selected last, so I didn't have to go and select the trim again. So I'm going to click off of the area. I'm going to click onto the circle to grab it only. I'm going to bring it over to this other corner, drop it there. I'm going to hold down the control key to select both items, and I'm going to hit trim. Now, there you go. Now I'm going to click off the area. I'm going to click onto the circle, drag it to the last corner, wait till you get that little hand, put it on the corner. I'm going to push down the control key. While I'm holding it down, I click on the line and I hit trim. There we go. We got the label. Oh, we got this extra little circle here. I'm going to click on the extra circle, and I can right click delete. I'm just going to hit the delete key on my keyboard, and look there. We have a label sized, a placemat sized label. Now, I want to keep this forever. So it's very simple to add this to your custom shapes. You select the item. You go up to this tab that says Tools right up here. You left click on it. Come straight down, and it says Save a Custom Shape. How simple is that? I'm going to left click there, and it says Label it. I'm going to call it, hey, go figure, label. Label 4, because I've done a lot of these, so I'm just going to call it Label 4 and save. And it's automatically saved in my custom shapes. Let's go check. Let's go here, go down to the L's, and there's Label 4. You don't even have to restart your software. It's already in there. So now, a year from now, if you want to do this, you can just select that label. It's already built for you. All right, so there's step 1. So now we want to put some fill in there. So we can fill it, but first I would like to make it an applique, so you can't stitch a lot of this. So the way I did this applique to make this placemat to where the back doesn't have any stabilizer showing is I put aqua mesh, which is a water soluble stabilizer, in the largest hoop, and I placed the tack down line for my applique. So we're going to make the applique feature, and that's this green with a bushy side on it. So I'm just going to left click on that. It's going to automatically add a tack down line. If I open up the applique, it's got a tack down line, a placement line, and then the satin stitch line. So that's all made for me already. So it's going to be an applique. So I get my water soluble stabilizer in the hoop, and I put down the placement stitch. Then I slide my backing underneath the hoop. I just put a muslin backing. You can put any kind of backing underneath the hoop. And then on top of the placement line, I put a thin cotton batting, and then I put my top fabric on top of that. Make sure I cover up the placement line on all those. And I go ahead and stitch out the tack down line, and then I trim off the edges all the way around the outside edge on the front and the back of the hoop. So now when I put my fill on, it'll stitch through all the layers, and that's the way I want the placemat to work. And then I will move later on, I'll move this last stitch line, which is the satin stitch line, to last. So if any of my fill goes to the edge, it won't be stitching over the satin stitch. So what we have to do now is, depending upon how your software's set up, you have to bring in another artwork. But if you change the fill to this applique, it'll change it, turn it back away from applique. So I'm going to take this artwork right here, and I'm just going to activate it, and I'm going to put a stipple fill in there. This stipple fill takes way too long. I'm going to put a cross stitch fill in there. And because I gave it a different artwork to follow, it won't go over, it won't take away from my applique. Except for that, density is really tight, so it looks like all stitches. So I'm going to make my stitch density about 10 millimeters. That's about 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to hit apply, and that's what that particular fill looks like. I don't like that much. So I'm going to select that fill, is still selected, and I'm going to do a texture fill. So I'm going to click on that one, and I'm going to do a texture fill, and I know that some of these that look like a diamond come out really nice. And then if I do this pattern size up to like a 20 millimeters, that's a little less than 3/4 of an inch. Now it looks like a cross-hatch quilt. And that was a lot quicker. If you please at home play with the stippling, auto stippling, the other textures, because you'll get some really cool textures that look like $1 million on this. Now, if I were to go through the slow redraw, watch it draw. It draws the outside edge, it draws that down, and then it puts the inside. I don't like that order because some of these cross etchings are going to hit into the border. So I am going to hit Select Tool, and I am going to go to my applique process, and I'm going to right-click. We need to break this applique apart. So it says Break Up Applique. How simple is that? Now, with the applique broken apart, I can move each one of those items as I see fit. So this is the satin stitch, and right down here is a way to move it up, down. This is your move it to the last, so I'm going to move that to the last. Now I'm going to see that I have that satin stitch on top, and it's going to stitch out a lot prettier. Let's see how it stitches out. So we got tack down, fill stitch, and the very last is a satin stitch. Woohoo! Now you do it like I showed you. You put aqua mesh in your largest hoop. You stitch out the placement. You put the back of your mat underneath your hoop. You put the batting down. You put the top down. You stitch out the tack down stitch, trim off, and then finish the last 2 steps. And you got yourself a placemat. My wife actually, I brought them home last night, and she actually loved them. So I'm going to make a few more and bring these samples home. So that is your placemat. Now let's do a little coaster for your wine glass. We're going to use that same custom shape. So I'm going to select everything. So if I select all items, well, let me show you how to save this first. Anytime you're getting ready to change things, let's save it first. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and I have a special file called Jeff's Classes. And I'm going to call this Wine Mat 4. And since it's just for my Floriani software, I would save it as a WAF. If I wanted to save it for the sewing machine, I would drop down this arrow here, And for brother and baby lock, PES. For some Berninas, EXP. So you kind of get that idea. Now hit save. All right. So now I'm going to select all items and hit delete. Oh, all that work's gone again. So now I'm going to go up to my custom shapes, and I am going to select label, the one we just made. That's label 4. And I'm going to transform that size to about 5 inch by 5 inch. That makes a good coaster size. So we're going to go to transform, and we're going to make sure that that's deselected. I'm going to highlight that and make it 5. Highlight the height and make it 5, and hit apply. Now I want my project to fill up my work area the best way, so what do? We click the magnifying glass twice. So that fills up the workspace. Now I like working with outlines, so I come over here under the properties and deselect the fill box and hit apply. So now I just have an outline. So this is going to be a little coaster, and what I want to do with the coaster is I want to make an opening in the middle for somebody's initials. So it actually could be their placement where they sit at a table. Here in Grand Junction we have so many formal dinners. I'm sure you have the same problem. But anyway, we're going to get this going that way. So to make a good hole in this, I like to fill it with a normal fill. And that's a standard fill. It's this purple star in the middle of the bottom row. And left click on that when it's highlighted, and it will automatically fill. So that's this magenta color. Now that it's filled, we can cut a hole in it. So we're going to cut a hole in it. Over here on the third arrow down, we have edit path, add inclination, or add a hole. So we're going to add a hole. I guess you could call it cutting a hole, but we're going to add a hole. So I'm going to left click on that. And nothing really happens until you bring your cursor over to the fill area. So I'm going to left click, and this is like digitizing, auto digitizing. And I'm going to left click straight down. I'm going to left click straight over, and I'm going to left click straight up. Now, if your lines are crooked, all you have to do is hit the backspace on your keyboard, and it backs up. I actually have a preference set on my grid that when I get close to a grid square, it'll click right to that grid square. Now, you don't want any other clicks. You want to right click at this point. Right click your mouse once, and it finishes the little hole. Now, to make this permanent, you have to bring your cursor over to the open work area and right click again. And here in a second, we have made a hole. It sometimes makes you feel really like you accomplished something to get this, because if you make one step off, it won't make this. So keep trying, keep following step by step. So now we have a fill with a hole in the middle. And I don't want this to be all solid fill. So I actually want it to be little wine glasses. And I looked in all my designs and everything, and there was a design that called glass in my shapes. So I'm going to start over and show you how to make this wine glass into a motif. It's really cool because you can save it and have it forever. So I'm just going to select this item. First I have to have the right select tool on. Select this item and delete it. All right, so I found a glass up into where? My custom shapes. Your shapes can be a lot of things. All you have to do is have some imagination and some patience. So here is glass. So there's my glass. I'm going to transform it to 1 inch tall. We did transform earlier, so we're going to make sure I want maintain aspect ratio checked this time. And my height, not the top one, my height is going to be 1 inch. And I'm going to hit apply. And to make that fit my workspace, double click on the magnifier. There we go. So we have to add stitches to this before we can save it as a motif. So I want just plain run stitch. We're going to go here. And I want to have my stitch length at 2.0 because it keeps the curves a little better. I'm going to hit apply. Now if I turn my fill off, if I go to the artwork, and I turn the fill off and hit apply, that's what the little stitch is going to look like. And here's it stitching out. Oh, that's not going to work. If it's stitching out starting in the middle of the glass, I'm going to have all these jump stitches, a million jump stitches. So I have to edit this a little bit first. So I'm going to hit my select key. I'm going to select the item. And I want to move my start and stop, one start here and a stop over here. And we do that with this little key right here, the shape tool. So I'm going to hit the shape tool. And it converted it to bright pink. And if I put my cursor on this red dot, it turns green. That's the starting point. So I'm dragging that green dot and dropping it right there. So there's my new starting point. Now it's red. I'm going to drag that red dot to this new starting point right there, stop point right there. All right, so let's see how this stitches out. It's all right, it stitches here and here, and then it goes to the next one. 2 lines across the top of this on my motif is going to be just fine. So now I've got my start and stop where I want it. I'm going to hit the red arrow again to select it. Now what we have to do is we have to turn it into stitches so the software knows to make it into a motif. So the way we're going to turn it into stitches is hit this lasso, not this top lasso, but this second lasso that's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th one down. And see the lasso attached to my cursor? Hold down your left cursor button, your mouse button, and make sure you get every part of that, and then overlap it and let go. And now you can see all the little stitch marks. Don't worry if you don't see across the top. There's stitches there. Don't worry about that. So these little squares indicate a stitch point, and that's what we wanted to see. With that highlighted, we go to our Tool tab again, left click on the Tool tab, and you have to be careful sliding down here. And there's a line that says Motif Pattern Editor. Slide over real carefully where it says Save Motif Pattern. If this isn't dark black, you didn't do something right and you have to start over. So I'm going to left click there. Oh, look at that preview. That's going to be really cool. I'm going to hit Save, and I'm going to call it Wine Glass 4. And it knows to save it as a motif pattern. If you click down here, there's no other thing you can save it as. And it automatically saves it to the right place where the software can find it. So I'm going to hit Save. And then we can hit Close. Sometimes it takes a second. There we go. So be patient. Anytime you have that little blue circle spinning, don't touch any other buttons. Just be patient. Because sometimes it'll take 5 minutes to generate all those spots. So now we have a new motif fill, and I'm going to show you where we're going to find that. Let's go to our designs. I have some things open here. So this is what we're actually going to make. See this? This is our 5-inch square coaster. We have little wine glasses in the back. We have a cutout in the middle, initials in the middle. So that's where we are heading. So let's go into this tab. Now, here's our thing that we had just got finished making a hole in. Now, I'm going to go to my select tool. Remember, you always got to make sure you're on the right tool. Now I'm going to select the fill. And that's this fill right here. And now I'm coming down. There's a star that says standard fill, a star that says fancy fill, and a star that says motif fill. Well, we just made a motif pattern. I'm going to try motif fill and see if I can find that wine glass. The default's 242 for my computer. Slide all the way down to where W would be. And looky here, wine glass number 4. Let's see what that looks like in there. It's straight. Pattern size is 3 millimeters. That's a little small. 7 millimeters is a 1/4 inch, so I'm going to go 8 millimeters. And my stitch length, I like it 2 on this small of a detail. I'm going to hit Apply. there's all my wine glasses. Those are pretty small. I'm going to make them bigger. I'm going to do it at 12. There we go. It looks more like wine glasses. And sometimes you'll find that the software won't fill all the way in because the pattern's too large. So just keep making the pattern a little smaller or larger and see where it fits the best. So there's our fill. That's going to make a wonderful coaster. Now I need to turn it into an applique. So if you happen to still have your artwork, I'm going to hit my artwork and I'm going to tell it to be an applique. And, well, it didn't do it right. It didn't do the inside there. Uh-oh, I know what I need to do. So I'm going to undo this, because undo arrow is your friend. And what I'm going to do is this one where we have our fill, I am going to duplicate that so I can change the fill. It won't do two fills on the same item, so I can duplicate this real carefully by touching this two pieces of paper here, and it duplicates it and puts it off to the side. So I'm going to need to grab that and layer it right back on top. And again, if it's really close, it's going to be fine, because this is going to be the applique part. Now I'm going to touch that fill, that second one I made, and I'm going to make it into an applique. And see, by using that particular fill as my applique, it appliqued the middle circle too. And that's pretty cool. Now, I'm going to break that applique apart again so I can control the layers and where they stitch. So I'm going to go over to this applique option, right click, and it says break up applique. So there it broke it up. So I have all my components of that applique. I have the tack down stitch, all that sort of thing. So when I'm stitching this out, I'm going to want to control where the placement stitches are, the tack down. And on my coaster, I don't want to see all the stitching on the back. So I'm going to want to do a tack down stitch right before I do the very last satin stitch, because I'm going to want to put a backing on this after I've done all my other stitching, and then do the satin stitch. And I may want to put the backing on before I do the center, so the center of that coaster doesn't billow out. So you have to think a little bit of the order it's going to go in. So if I were to slow redraw this right now, it's doing all that now, and you know, it's just the order isn't quite right. So I'm going to open up my my little line that is for the applique, and there's an applique part here. So you have a run stitch and you have an applique there. So we got a lot of different little run stitches here that are holding things down. So I'm going to need to know where my placement is first. So I'm going to send one of these run stitches. Is that a run stitch? Let's hit a plus. So I'm going to send that run stitch to the very beginning. I can do that right there. It says move to first. Okay, so there's a run stitch to show me placement. Now I'm going to need another run stitch for a tack down. So I could duplicate that, or I can just use one of these run stitches here. I'm going to take that run stitch. I'm going to move that to the very beginning. I don't care. The stitches are exactly the same. So if I were to stitch this out, there's a run stitch for placement, and there's a run stitch for tack down. That's what I wanted, because I want the fabric in the middle. So I don't need to tack down the middle fabric. Gets a little technical at this point, but this is how we need to build it to make it work the best. Let's see, what stitch is this? So that's just artwork. I'm going to go ahead and delete my artwork because I don't need it anymore. So that's one easy way to delete your artwork. Now we want to be able to That's my run stitch for around the center block. We want this guy here to stitch right after the run stitch. So I'm going to move him up, and let's see where, one more time. All right, so we have an additional run stitch here for that center. We really don't need that because we're going to do the steel stitch. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to right click and delete. Now this is the outside satin stitch or steel stitch. Okay, we're great. We're right there. Now I want to put a tack down behind here, on here, so we can put the backing fabric on there. So I am going to find one of these run stitches. I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste. So I copied and pasted, so I have an extra run stitch right there. Now I'm going to select him and move him to right after I do, yeah, let's put the initials in first, because if we start messing around without the initials in there, we're having an order issue. So the initials come from our text. We could do monograms, we could do whatever you want. I'm just going to do a simple text. Click with the out over in this area. It'll default to my text. I'm going to just put my initials in there and hit apply. And I'm going to size my text. You have to be careful. You don't want to start moving your text until we select the red arrow. Red arrow is your friend. And bring it down and see how it fits in the box. So I'm going to put the bottom of my first initial in the box and squish it down to fit. And I might just squish it in this way a little bit to fit. There we go. I got the initials in there now. That wasn't too hard. And if you want to change colors on all these, you would just select that item, and I want to change it to purple. Click one of these color chips. And sometimes it's easier to kind of see where you're at here on your order. So I want this, my initials, to stitch right before or after the steel stitch. So I'm actually going to move it all the way up to before the steel stitch. I have a mantra. There's two kinds of embroiderers. There's ones that sew a sample and ones that wish they did. So I always do a sew a sample on something that is inexpensive, but also that represents what I'm going to sew it on the final project. All right, so I'm going to do my redraw, see how we're doing here. Placement, tack down, fill, fill, initials, satin, satin, satin. What's missing? Right here, right before here, and right after that, right there, I want a tack down to put the backing on the back of this coaster, so nothing ugly is showing on the back of the coaster. So I need to move one of these runs to right after the initials. So I'm going to select this run, and sometimes it'll let me put it in exactly where I want. Sometimes I have to kind of have a workaround. Perfect. Right after JV, I have a run. So let's see what happens now. Oh, let's grab the whole thing here. There's a run. I can put the back on now. See, here's that run. Oh, I'm not seeing a run. Are you seeing a run? I missed something. All right, after that, there's my run stitch. There's that stitch and that stitch. Oh, it's perfect. All right, so that's your coaster. And that'd be a nice little party favor. Everybody could leave with a coaster with a customized motif on it that nobody in the whole wide world would ever have again. So here's Bernina Jeff. This is your FTCU Club for January 2021 from High Fashion Sewing Machines. Please remember to subscribe. If you own a Bernina, look under Bernina Jeff. I have I have about 20 or 30 videos on how to make your Bernina 7 and 5 series perform to the best abilities. And I plan on doing some for embroidering on your 7 and 5 series to help you out on settings and things like that. Thanks much. Remember to subscribe. Bye.